Life is hard. End of sermon. You're not so lucky. Life is hard. But that's the problem. Most of us come to church, most of us come to God because we experience life that way, and somehow we think that God is here to change all that, to actually make life easier. Think about it for a minute. What do we pray for most of the time? To take away suffering. When we're not feeling well, to make us better. To make things easier. To make the road more level. To get us over that obstacle. To take away the challenges that are before us. To mend the brokenness. We can sum it all up by saying we come to God because we experience life to be difficult and hard, and we want God to make it easier. The problem is, that's not what God's all about. So we hear a story today in Mark's Gospel about Jesus and three of his closest friends, Peter, James, and John, and he takes them up a mountain. Oh, that sounds like a nice picnic, doesn't it? Well, this last year, as you know, I was on sabbatical, and I made a pilgrimage from Cambridge, where I was, to York, in the northern part of England. It's an obvious thing for an Anglican tradition priest to do. And while I was at York Minster, the big, huge cathedral there, I decided that I was going to do one of those things that such tourists like to do, and it's climb the Great Tower. Now, they warn you, it's a challenge. There are 476 steps in the Great Tower. Now, if we have such a sort of tower like that, modeled on such a great tower here. Bill, how many steps are in this tower? Do you know? How many steps?
Oh, I don't know.
George? 96. So the one at York is at least 4 times this. And if you've ever had a tour and ever gone up our tower, you know, it's a circular staircase. It's exactly the same in York Minster. But it's 4 times as high. And it's a circular staircase, and there's one way up, and there's no other way down. And once you start, there ain't no stopping. There's one little place you might call a landing, and it's really not a landing. What it is a narrow staircase, a narrow pathway to another part of the staircase. So there's no turning around. If you get part of the way there and you said this was a mistake, there ain't no going back, because you're taken up in groups. And trust me, you want to turn around and go down, there's no room. And there's no stopping. You keep going. Now, I just turned 68, which meant I was 67 when this was happening. I finally realized how old I was. I wasn't 37 anymore. And I was wearing a backpack since I was on pilgrimage that had all of my temporary belongings in it. It was about 25 pounds worth, because this is a 5-day trip. So there I was, about a third of the way up, saying, what did I do? I had my walking stick on one side and a handrail on the other. And you just had to keep going. I made it. I'm reasonably fit. But at the end, I questioned myself, what was I thinking? I did make my way back down, because you have to go back the same way you came in. And they signal you it's time to go back. And so you very gingerly walk down the staircase. And I made sure that I paid the 5 quid to get my pin. I did it. I thought about wearing it, pinning it to my vestments today. The next day, my pilgrimage took me to Lincoln. Lincoln is built, the cathedral is built on the ruins of an old Roman fortress. Now, Roman fortresses were built on strategic places. Now, there's no more strategic place to build a fortress than where? At the top of a hill. Little did I know that you got to the cathedral in Lincoln by taking a street that's called Steep Street. And if you know anything about the English, they're very plain in the way they name things. Kind of like us a little bit. What do you expect to find on Market Street? The market. Steep Street is steep. It's a 16.5-degree incline. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but 16.5 degrees is pretty steep. In fact, this particular street is the 4th steepest road in all of England. And it's right in the middle of a town. And trust me, walking stick in hand, they even have a railing on the curb side of the street, of the sidewalk, to assist you in walking up the street, and it's straight up. No curves. Not like a sort of windy thing. You go just straight up. Now, at the time, I'm 67, and I'm about a third of the way up this after having gone up the tower the day before and saying, now what am I doing? And doesn't a little old lady pass me? Do I feel embarrassed? I can tell you. But the difference was this. She lived there. This was her life. This is how she got around. I'd never do it again. If I could help it. But this was what she did every day. Because she was not only striding up the street, she was carrying a bag of groceries. She had just been to the market. You see, life can be hard. There can be obstacles and challenges. But when they become part of our lives, we begin to understand how we can overcome them by facing them. We begin to see that, in fact, God gives us what we need to cope with them on a day-to-day basis. We begin to see that when we confront them and when we see them, it is by the grace of God that we can overcome them, and that nothing that comes to us is beyond God's strength and God's wisdom and God's capacity to help us get beyond them. And so it is, Jesus takes his closest friends up this mountain. Mount Tabor is 3 times the size, 3 times the height of York Minster. So this was no leisurely picnic. I can't imagine what they felt like going up that mountain. And then this is what they see. Maybe it was depletion of oxygen. I don't know. But they see Jesus glowing like the sun. And Moses and Elijah. And a cloud. And a voice. And they're terrified. And the voice says, "This is my beloved. Listen to him." They shield their eyes. Suddenly, when they open them, there's only Jesus. They saw in an instant the glory of God. God gave them that special grace because, you see, right after this, they were going to go down that mountain. And they were going to Jerusalem. They were going now to a place where the one they had been following and the one they loved was going to be persecuted, was going to be challenged in ways that they never could have imagined, where he would be betrayed by one of their own, or even the one that was closest to him, Peter, who was on that mountain with him, would deny him. And all of them would run away. They were going to Jerusalem, where he would be spat upon and beaten and stripped of his clothing and ultimately nailed to a cross and killed. You think life is hard. Yet those challenges were there. But they were given this glimpse, this little bit of glory. Because this is the promise that God was giving to Jesus. That what he was about to face was not the end. That what he was about to face is nothing compared to the glory that would still be revealed in him. And Jesus wanted to share this with his closest friends because he wanted them to know that no matter what happened to him or what would eventually happen to them, this too would be their destiny. And so even though the challenge seemed to be overwhelming to them, and even after Jesus died and they locked themselves away in an upper room for fear, eventually he appeared to them and said, "Peace be to you." And he breathed on them. And he gave them that same Spirit that was given to him at that mountaintop, where they became the children of God. That same Spirit that dwells in you and in me here, now, today. That same Spirit that teaches us that there is no obstacle, no challenge in our lives that is too great. That same Spirit that says there is no mountain too high that we cannot climb. That same Spirit that says there is glory yet to be revealed in us. What challenge will you face this day? What is God asking you to overcome? What is God asking you to look at? And what glory is God promising to you this day as you gaze upon the one who glows like the sun? In a few days, Lent will be upon us. The glory will disappear. We will be walking that path with Jesus. It will seem dark. It will seem less than happy. But it is to teach us that life is hard. But nothing in our life separates us from the love of God. Because at the end of that 40 days, even as we retell the dark story of Jesus' suffering and death, there is always Easter. There is always glory. There is always life. That is our treasure. Lay hold of it, even when there is seemingly only darkness, because that is the promise that God gives us this day. That is the promise God gives to you. There is nothing, no hill, no mountain, no challenge, no problem too great for God. You are God's children. In you, God is well